In this short video, I want to show you what I have found to be the best fenders for my Co-Motion Americano. I've been through quite a few of them, and I think this is the best solution so far. So let's see what I found. This bicycle is my Bruce Gordon Rock and Road that I purchased in 2007. I believe this has the most clearance of any bike for fenders that I've ever owned. And I actually think it's kind of still the gold standard for fender compatibility for 700C wheels. If you notice here, the fork is 400 millimeters. I've already measured this from the fork crown to the axle, which is, well, way down there. We don't care to see that. And the distance, the clearance that I have between the bottom of the fork crown right here to the top of the tire underneath here is 26 millimeters. That's a good amount of distance. And you can see it's actually quite a bit of distance, because if you look closer, you can see a really big gap between the tire and the fender. Now that's probably a little bit too much gap, and I could lower this fender down more to be a little bit closer to the tire in order to give me lots of clearance. Now if you notice the way the fender attaches here, it's not attached to a bolt which goes through my fork crown. It's actually using a Durama, which is right underneath here. Now a Durama, if you're not familiar with it, it's a little bolt that's kind of hidden within the fork crown, and it actually hangs down in this area and has a nut that fits onto the bolt underneath here. It makes for a really clean attachment, which is nice. So I actually have room underneath here, quite a bit of room between the top or the bottom of the bolt and the tire. If I stick my finger in here, yeah, I can barely feel it. And I've probably got a good, 10, 15 millimeters of clearance from the bottom of this bolt to the top of the tire. Now this tire is a Schwalbe Marathon, as you can see right here, and this is a 35 millimeter tire. So I have tons of clearance on this bicycle with these fenders. Now these fenders here, you see, I'll zoom out a little bit here. These fenders are from, bear with me for a second. These are Velo Orange fenders, and these are the hammered black ones. Now these are approximately 45 to 47 millimeters wide, and they typically say that these can handle a 32 millimeter width tire to 38 millimeter width tire, and I would agree with that. So this is actually a good fender installation on this bike, except for having probably a little too much clearance on here, which is not totally bad, but it's really nice because I don't get a whole lot of debris that catches between my tire and the fender. So this is a good bike to fender installation on the Bruce Gordon. Oh, one other thing I need to mention. For the connoisseurs that really know Bruce Gordon, they may notice that this fork is a little different. This is not a Unicrown fork, which actually came with the bike. Unicrown forks are supposed to be really strong, but I didn't like the way they don't give you as much clearance here. So I actually had Alex Mead, who is a custom frame builder, build me this fork for this bicycle. I think it's a nice, elegant solution, and I've ridden thousands and thousands of miles. I would highly recommend Alex Mead if you want to have him build something custom for you. He does really great work. And this is, I think, a beautiful fork that complements this bicycle. This is my Kent Erikson that I had built around 2016. If you don't know who Kent Erikson is, he actually started Moots. And well, we're not going to go into the details, but basically they departed ways with each other, and he started making frames under his own name. This is actually probably brazed, or excuse me, welded up by Brad Bingham of Brad Bingham Bikes. So, but let's talk about fenders on this one. So on this bike, the front fork is again 400 millimeters from the top of the fork crown to the axle. So once again, this is a standard length. The clearance from the bottom of the fork crown on this unicrown bicycle to the top of the tire is 18 millimeters. Now on this bicycle I'm running 32 millimeter width 5000S Continental tires. So the clearance on this is definitely much tighter than it is on my Bruce Gordon, but I still do have clearance on here. Now I have not physically attached this fender to this bicycle permanently right now. I'm just showing this for demonstration purposes only. So that's why you see the tape holding the fender on, okay? So don't say, oh, that's a dangerous, blah, 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 blah. But so I'm just showing this for clearance issues. This one I'm actually using a through bolt through my fork crown, and it holds it on by a little L bracket on the actual fender itself. Now here I actually probably only have a good 10 millimeters clearance between the fender and the tire itself. So I don't have a ton of clearance on this one, but yet this one does work real well. It doesn't rub the tire at all. It's silent, and it's a really good fender to bike compatibility. I specified when I had Kent make this bike that I wasn't going to run anything bigger than 32 millimeter tires. Now the fender on this one is from, these are Velo Orange hammered fenders in a 47 millimeter width, or maybe 45 to 47, but yet it does curve really well, and I still end up with some clearance between the tire and the fender. So this is a good compatibility. I'm not too worried about this bicycle. So it's good when the bicycle, whoever builds it, really knows what type of tires and fenders you're going to install, and they accommodate for that to give you good clearance. Now typically I don't run this bike with fenders, but I do have a set of them on here, and I'm able to easily put them on and take them off. So I just got a couple pieces of tape, and that's how I typically run this bike. Let's talk about the problem child. This is my 2022 Americano from Co-Motion, of course. So I struggle with, or I should say I struggled with good fender compatibility on this bicycle for a long time. But let me show you the problems. Here you see that we have, again, a 400 millimeter fork in length from the top of the fork down to the axle, just like all other standard 700C wheels should have. I am running the same Continental 700 by 35 marathon tires on this bicycle. That's a standard width and size tire, and I like the 35s over the 32s. If I go above 35, that doesn't really work. So here's one of the big problems. On this bicycle, let me adjust it a little bit here. On this bicycle, the total amount of distance between the tire and the bottom of the fork crown here is 14 millimeters. Now, if you remember, my Bruce Gordon had 26. My Kent Erikson had 18. So this is the standard unicrown fork from Co-Motion. So how is it that from Erikson, now we'll admit on the Erikson bike, it is a fork that was built by American Fabricators bicycle company, and I'm sure you know them. No, excuse me, Independent Fabrication Bicycles. So they gave 18 millimeters clearance here, but the unicrown fork from Co-Motion only has 14. So that makes for some real challenges. And here where lies, I think, the biggest problem or a potential problem that Co-Motion has. Now these being 35 millimeter width tires, I originally tried the Rene Hurst fluted. These are called the Rene Hurst fluted. Let me get it in the camera so you can see it. These are the fluted H47s. And they say they're compatible with 32 to 38 width tires. And this being in 35, it should be perfect, right? So I used a drum on here, but with this all the way up against the fork crown, you can see that there's very little clearance. I can't even begin to get a finger or anything between the tire and this fender. And I tried bending and bending this fender many times in order to gain clearance. But what actually happened is I would go down the road, the inside of this fender would rub the tire. And that's a real problem. So that tells me, one, Co-Motion didn't try to make this fork and tire combination compatible with other fenders. Because this is a standard width fender for a 35 millimeter width tire, and it should work. There's no reason it shouldn't work. So I remember, I think I used these fenders when I went I did the Southern Tier, and I fought this for hundreds of miles trying to bend them to make sure that they wouldn't rub. It was a real pain in the butt. So what did I do? Well, I thought and thought and thought. There's no way I could have Co-Motion make me a different fork. That's not a good suggestion. That would not work. So I looked and looked for all different types of fenders. And hang on a second, I'll get what I think works best. So, knowing that I needed more clearance between the fender and the tire, I determined that if I had a fender that had a shallower bend to it and would be splayed outward rather than more downward to hug the tire, that might work. Plus, if I didn't use a diorama and I were to use just an L bracket here, I could get the fender higher. Because when you use a diorama, you actually have to put some big washers underneath here in order to keep the fender from being pulled way up in there. And that reduces the room between the bottom of the fork and the top of the tire. So here's what I found. This is the profile of the fluted H47. I don't know if you can see that real well, but you can see this profile here. And I wanted one that actually would come out farther on both sides. And I knew it would have to be wider. But having enough width in here for a wider fender, that's not a problem at all. So what I found was, by Velo Orange, if I were to, I bought their Zeppelin 52 millimeter fluted fenders. And they say these are good to tire widths up to 42 millimeters. So if you see, this one actually has, it does come down, but it's a much wider fender. And I'll show you that here. If you see both these fenders, you can instantly see where the inner fender is definitely smaller than my newer, wider fender. Plus, with Rene Hurst, I was using a diorama on this one, and here I use an L bracket. So that allows the fender to sit up higher in the fork crown. So I'll try to demonstrate that now. As you can see, I've got everything kind of disconnected so I can show you these side by side. So if I put this fender up in here, make sure I get it connected properly. Here we go. All right, so let me take a bolt off here. Excuse me, a nut. It's amazing how we always get those interchanged, isn't it? Okay, so get it connected up here. There we go, and there. Now, you can see that, I'll just kind of hold it and you'll be able to see it. So now you can see that with this fender, I have a lot more clearance between the fender and the tire. Is it perfect? No, but it's much more livable and I don't have any rubbing problems. Plus this has really good coverage on or over the tire. You can see it's well up in there. It will definitely cover both sides of the tire. Let me get you a front view here. There, you can see how it's going to cover the tire really easily and has clearance for little tiny sticks and stones that might get caught in the fender and get flown out. So this is a much better solution for an Americano that only has 14 millimeters of clearance between the tire and the bottom of the fork crown. So I hope that's helpful to some of you that are looking for the perfect, or what I think the best, fender to Americano fork combination at this time. Now, so for the rear fender compatibility, I've actually had to add my own little bracket right back here. They have a braze-on for a fender, but there is so little room here that there's no way you are going to get a fender here. That's impossible. Even if you put a fender in there and you bang it and hammer it into the shape of the chainstays, which is what they actually recommend, not Co-Motion recommends, but if you use aluminum fenders, they say you shape the fender to your to your chainstays. So I didn't want to elect to do that. I want to have a lot more clearance. So I added a little bracket back here which raises this up. As you can see, the fender sits just proud of my chainstays. Yes, it'd be nice if the fender came down here, but that's not possible. So I would really wish that Co-Motion could design a better attachment of their chainstays, which would give a lot more clearance here in order to allow proper fender fitment. Don't know if that's a word. Proper fender fitting here. Now there's plenty of, Co-Motion did a great job here on the seat stay bridge. That's perfect. No problem there. I've got braze-ons on the back of my custom racks, so I really didn't have to worry about hitting another place here for fender mounts, but they didn't give you any extras. They only gave you the one. I wish Co-Motion would put 2 attachments back here. I don't know if that's a cost saving, but it seems like there's plenty of room here to put another attachment for fenders and racks. So we'll see. So I hope that's helpful to some of you that have an Americano and are struggling with some type of fender rub and haven't found the perfect fenders for you. Once again, these are the VO, or these are the Velo Orange Zeppelins 52. At the time I got these, I wanted to try to get the black ones, but they've been out of stock for quite a while, so I went with silver. It looks fine. I'm not too picky about the color for fenders. I mean, it's more about the function than it is the color on these. All right, I guess that's all for now.